So I think the first question, I think what we'll maybe do is just go down the line with the questions and then see if there's a different format that wants to emerge. But the first question is really how. So how did you go about learning your treasured language, and maybe what were the obstacles that you were facing?
Well, we came to the United States in 1979, and I was only a year old, and my parents can only speak Mien. And so growing up here, I only spoke English. And the conversations that I had with my parents was very shallow, really scratching the surface. I would simply greet them, ask them how they're doing, whether they want to eat, just really minimal conversations. And again, I felt compelled a couple of years ago to have long conversations with them. And so I hooked up with Mark, because Mark teaches Mien literacy classes twice a week for 2 hours a day. What does it take? I think it takes passion. I can't take credit for wanting to learn my own language. It was just a desire that I had. And if you have a treasured language and you want to learn it, find an instructor and study an hour a day for maybe a couple of weeks, a couple of months. It'll really grow on you. I've been able to have those long, deep conversations, not only with my parents, but when I go to churches or the Mien community, I'm able to move through a room full of hundreds of people. And because they don't speak a whole lot of English, I feel like it's my job to speak the treasured language if I want to connect with them. And fortunately, I've been able to do that. Again, it's something that I had a burning desire to do. I enjoy it, and I don't think I can take any credit for that.
So for my community, like I said earlier, for 70 years we didn't have speakers, and the reason why is directly connected to a lot of the social injustice and colonization and racism that happened here in the Bay Area. We suffered through 3 major waves of invasion here in the Bay Area in California. There were the Spanish missions that happened, where Ohlone people and other mission Indians were forced to speak Spanish as opposed to their native languages. And the worst stage after the Mexican period was when Americans came in, and there was a genocide that occurred where people would often be killed if they spoke their language, and it was legal to kill native people here in California for a period of time. And as a result, in the 1930s, we just had 2 speakers that remained in our community. And those 2 speakers, what they did though was they were determined to make sure that our language survived and that it persisted. And so what they did was they sat down with this linguist named John Harrington, and they recorded as much of the language as they could remember. They recorded words, they recorded the grammatical structures, they recorded songs, they recorded stories. They recorded as much as they could so that one day future generations of Ohlone people, like myself, would be able to pick up all of that wealth of documentation and be able to speak it again. And so, and it paid off, because today we're able to do that as a result of those 2 people named Angela de los Colos and Jose Guzman, who recorded the language just about 20 miles away from here in the 1930s. And so what I had to do in order to relearn it was sit down and very thoroughly and extensively go through all that old documentation, the archives, and be able to make it a modern language so that it could be spoken again. And so what that meant is understanding what our sounds would be like, understanding what our worldview is like, understanding how to create new words if we're lacking a word, that because with the reality of not having a language spoken for 70 to 80 years, there's going to be gaps. And so we didn't have coffee shops back then, or the internet or refrigerators or anything like that. So we have to create sometimes gap or words to fill in those gaps. And the purpose is to have a living language that connects us to our home, and connects us to our ancestors, and connects us to our family, and connects us to our land. And so when we speak the language, I genuinely feel that we connect to all of those people before us, and it raises our self-esteem, and it boosts our connection to the land, and it fosters community with each other, because we're able to speak something which is unique to us. And so it's a process, but listening to those old songs and going through that old documentation and understanding what's true of our language helped me be able to learn and reconnect and share it with people in my community.
Sana. I think for me, to be honest, initially it was not by choice. We arrived in the U.S. In 1992, 3 months short of my 12th birthday. And what happened was that I came at an awkward age. 12 is kind of a little old to kind of fit in and master a language fast and lose your accent, which I tried. As you can probably hear, I still have an accent, and I'm almost 35. So when we came here, I didn't belong in the African American community. I didn't belong, well, I didn't look anyone else either. So the only people that I relate to that I belonged or fit in, for better or worse, were other Eritreans who spoke my language, who had similar experience. So, and at home, my mother didn't speak English, and she made sure that we didn't speak anything else but English. So almost resentfully, had to speak the language, and all through high school it was the same way. Just that was just kind of where I belonged and where I fit in. And it wasn't until after high school and I went to college that I had this revived pride in my native language. And two things kind of made that happen. The first one was that my brother, who's 4 years younger than I am, was sent from Seattle, which I grew up in, and there's a sizable Eritrean community there. He was, quote unquote, going the wrong path, and my family sent him to come live with me in a small town where I went to school. And what I noticed for the first time was that he was losing the language. And it almost occurred to me just overnight. One day he would just I would speak to him in Tigrinya, which 4 years earlier he was fine, and then he would just, it was almost like he was ashamed. And then it just something clicked, this is not good. So that just seeing my brother ashamed of the language and not speaking that, it kind of woke me up. Hey, I have to be this for him. So that happened. Another thing that happened was my freshman year of college, I went back home for Thanksgiving break to Seattle, and I reconnected with some old friends a couple of them literally arrived on the same flight with us from Sudan. And they did not speak Tigrinya. We were the same age, we came on the same flight, and they spoke only English, and they really were not pretending like they didn't speak Tigrinya. They really didn't. And I'm like, what just happened? What's going on here? So that was another wake-up thing where I'm like, that could be me. I tried to lose it, but now it was just then I just kind of went completely the other way, where I started teaching Tigrinya in the church. Every weekend I drove back to Seattle, started teaching the little kids, and all of a sudden I had just this desire and need to hold on to this language like it was disappearing tomorrow. So that's kind of my experience, and I've been on that journey ever since.
Thank you all so much, especially for sharing such personal stories and expressing to us how connected your language and your identity for each of you. That personal struggle, it's probably something that a lot of us share. So thank you for opening up that much to us. I have one more question for you, which is kind of, do you have any insight as to what is possible when we come together across these kinds of differences from such different communities? Do you have any sense of what is happening here tonight, or what's possible here tonight?
Well, my experience with learning my own language, a little bit more than where I was at when I was just at the very surface, just building relationships and connecting with people. I've been able to hook up with many high quality people who are connecting me with other people. And from there, I noticed that many doors are opening. I'm doing things and going places that I have never been before, and that also applies in business and in all areas of life. And the one thing that I don't reveal to most people is that I used to be a stammerer. And so I noticed the importance of learning language, and so I knew that I had to harness that power. And I was battling anxiety for many years, and for the most part, it's behind me. And I'm very glad to be sitting here with you.
About the question, I think that overlapping feelings involved with a program like tonight, with languages that might be threatened or might in some cases be suppressed, is that it shows that when we nourish and foster our languages, and when we foster our languages to be things that are important, that connect us to our family and connect us to our communities and connect us to our ancestors, then we realize that each time that we speak our languages are important and they're beautiful, and they contain worldviews about how our communities see the world around us. And we can't let our languages perish, because each time that a language stops being spoken, a worldview goes away or goes to sleep. And when that happens over and over, they're dense and bullets into the human imagination and what makes us special as throughout humanity. How boring would it be if we just spoke 2 or 3 languages? And how boring would it be if collectively we let all of our worldviews and our philosophies that are embedded in the language just go away also? That would take away everything that makes humanity special away. And so I think that we have to foster, especially the languages that are suffering the most and that might be the most threatened. And it's not that it's just that if any of these languages go away, it affects all of us, I think, just because of this collective human capacity that we have to care for each other. And we can't let that happen.
I agree with both of them said, and what I would add to that is that I think place like this, whether you speak a native language or not, just it makes you feel less alone, because those of us who are really fighting to hold on to our language, it's a lonely place, because I know a lot of people who came at the age that I did that either speak, that are older, who came here older, and they're they've always spoken the language, and then there are those who don't speak the language at all, and then there's me, who is kind of in between world, who speak the English which is a lot easier for me to go to English a lot of times, but who has to make that effort to make sure that my daughter speaks the language fluently, which she does, by the way, and who has to force my husband to make sure my daughter is spoken to in English. So, I mean, in Tigrinya. So it's like a daily effort. It feels like a fight sometimes, and then you don't always have people that are telling you you're doing a great job, or or you don't really know how that's gonna pan out later. So all you're doing is like you're just in on the grind every day, making sure that I'm gonna do all I can, and then we'll see what happens. And then you come here, there are people who are literally trying to revive a language, and then those of us who like have people who speak our language all over the place, but we're not seeing them on a day-to-day basis. So you just to know that there are people who care, who are people trying, who are making a difference. It kind of makes you feel like, okay, I'm on the right path and I'm doing something right, and it's gonna have its benefit down the line. I mean, for me, it certainly has. Just I have a lot of pride that I can translate for the elderly, that I can do Tigrinya videos. In a lot of times when I do my YouTube segments in English, I could do that in English for Tigrinya in native language for speakers. But for my daughter, that's like another level of pride, because I'm gonna make sure that she speaks it, and then she's gonna have a support of like-minded people who are gonna cheer her on down the line. So it really is very special to be here. So thank you for making it happen, Robin.